Hey, welcome to week 9 of the RiSE, the podcast. It's the podcast that really intends to bring positive change to the world. The podcast that defends the small business owner. It also defends creativity, new ideas, problem solving, independent critical thinking, finding a new path forward, and a way with passion and, of course, some blood, sweat, and tears to make it all happen. Each week we feature guests who are making a difference for the good, whether it's how we do business, whether it's how we lead at work, making communities stronger, eradicating poverty, touting abundance, or new ways to heal and be healthy, or empowering youth to be all they can be while learning from our elders. The show is a show of ideas, solutions, and new thinking that has us wanting to create a vision for where and who we want to be. So let's kick it off. Improv is a team skill, and the practices are active listening, developing creativity, curiosity, observing judgment, observing judgment, but also losing a little bit of judgment, thinking on your feet, embracing playfulness to support communication and collaboration. The experiential nature of improv increases engagement, provides a safe place to try out something new, and encourages innovation and builds trust among teams. And today our guests are two partners. You can see two people here with me today, and they are the lead facilitators of Yes Unlimited, a Toronto area company that leads improv learning programs in organizations and companies to enhance communication, creativity, and improve collaboration skills. So who are our guests? Well, you see Tracy Shea-Porter. She's an entrepreneur, and yeah, thank you. Now we make the distinction. She's an entrepreneur, facilitator, improviser, speaker, and writer. She's also the CEO and co-founder of Yes Unlimited. I'll go on after it because she's got, Bachelor of Arts and Education, member of ACTRA, so she's really super talented. And Ralph MacLeod, who you see.
Can't follow that.
Yeah, you can't. Hard act to follow. I know. Thank you and good night, everybody. Is co-founder of the Social Capital Theater, also the Bad Dog, and Yes Unlimited. He has worked as a professional actor, comedian, and improv teacher for over 30 years. He's widely regarded as one of the country's leading experts in the field of improvisation. He trains next generation's comedians and has brought improv techniques to dozens of businesses, including Accenture, Constellation Software, Spark 44 Canada, and the University of Toronto. So welcome to you both. What a joy to have you here with us. One thing we all need, I feel, and we've talked about this off air, is there's we need a little bit more joy and laughter in our day-to-day lives. Do you sense that we've all become a little more serious in how we approach life and how we work, how we socialize, and just approach how we're doing life in general when things started to unravel back in mid-March of 2020? What's your take?
I couldn't agree more. It's funny because, Ralph and I have been working together maybe 10 years, and we've known each other 20 plus years. And the pandemic is a whole new situation. I mean, for the whole world, certainly. Improv is a kind of a skill where you are used to being in person. You get into a circle together. Often we go into companies or universities and we're in a circle and there's tons of interaction and it gets playful. So, I'm sure Ralph can jump in and agree that, having that all go away, this in-person contact, and suddenly being on a format where the only option you have is kind of to be isolated, we had to find a new way to approach things.
Yeah, absolutely. The joy in life seems to be dissipating, exacerbated by social media, which gives us the idea of connecting without really connecting. It's actually makes it worse in several ways. It's what's come out when it talks about Facebook and social media in general. But yeah, the idea that we connect, we take time. Like, remember being bored? Like when you didn't have a screen that you could pick up and instantly connect, virtually, and therefore not in a real way with other people. So that the idea of like just hanging out with people and connecting and play. And play as adults, like play is seen as kind of a maybe a pejorative thing because it doesn't create something, but play now and the way psychology is looking at play with neuroplasticity and now neurogenesis around. So yes, joy, play, connecting, being with other adults in a way that's, what you said in your description or your introduction, David, was great, in a non-judgmental, collaborative, active listening, existing kind of way.
Yeah, and just being there for one another, and also too, since this began, our societal stress levels and fear have gone up as well, in a large part due to the amount of fearful messages we receive every day in the news media, and having a background in radio, TV journalism, I'm a bit like, okay, like maybe taper it down a little bit,
Yeah.
We receive, if we're tapped into the news media, it starts to affect you, really.
Yeah.
If you're dialed into that every day, that fear, that stress is also going to affect our creativity, and our openness, and our new. It's also going to affect new ideas from flourishing. And boy, if there was ever a time we need new thinking and new ideas, this is it.
I had an experience, and I want to share it because it was so meaningful early in the pandemic around improv, because, Ralph and I are always talking about improv as playful, and really when you're doing improv, you can't be anywhere else but in the moment you're in. So playful presence, right? And active listening. So, we were doing these incredibly dynamic in-person events, really collaborative, all about developing teams. And suddenly we had to move it online. And I have to be honest with you, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. But the moment I knew that we could connect online, and we absolutely can, was when I was working with facilitators around the world to do some improv online. And what happened was I was in a breakout room. We all know breakout rooms now. And we were doing an exercise called gift giving, okay? And so it was me and some stranger in California, and we basically gave each other a gift. And I asked her, what lights you up? What lights you up? And she said, well, during this time, being around the ocean. And I said, oh, well, I'm going to give you a magical cloak of ocean right now. And no matter where you are, you'll have the ocean with you. And she just beamed. And, immediately we stayed connected the whole pandemic. And the reason I wanted to mention that is, yes, it's true. It's more challenging to connect. However, it's still possible to connect. And there are ways, and I know, Ralph, you did a lot of teaching, actually, and you got into it yourself in the pandemic.
Yes. So again, David, perfect, great encapsulation of the time we live in, right? We're bombarded by all this negative messaging. Unfortunately, people generate revenue by clicks, and no better way to get us clicking on things than to scare us or get us angry, right? And as the Stoics say, the soul is dyed with the color of our thoughts. So we're bombarded with that. It becomes our world, it becomes what we know. But what improv does, when you get together with people, and as Tracy said, I've been teaching a lot online during the pandemic, we would have 2-hour sessions where at the end of the class, I'd say, okay, put your hand up. If at one point in the last 2 hours, you thought about the pandemic, and no hands would ever go up. And I say, look at your body language right now. We came in, everybody was like tight, and now we're all like, we're chatting, we're connecting, we're being ourselves. Like, oh yeah. And that's the value in the presence of, or the value of being present, being in play, like all that stuff that occupies our brain power 90% of the time, things we can't control, worried about the future, upset about the past, thinking about work and family and all the things that we really have no control over. But when you get in presence, all that stuff goes away, and give yourself a mental holiday, and it allows you to refocus and come out refreshed and getting back into being collaborative and thinking, creatively and all that stuff, because you just give yourself a break.
And there's a lot of studies around this, by the way, about how the brain responds. You talked about the news, David, gets us all into fight and flight syndrome, and, we're scared, fear, right? Improv is actually, there's a lot of studies on what improv does for the brain. And it actually gets you out of that fight and flight syndrome and opens you to a space of creativity. So, yeah.
You can't be creative. They've done studies too. You can't be creative when you're in a state of fear and stress and because you're tightening up. Whereas isn't improv then, Tracy, it's about opening people up, opening up to possibility, opening up to new ideas, opening up to it, what somebody else has to say,
Just like you say, when we're stressed, the options that we see narrow. We only see like exactly fight or flight, right? We see very few options. But when you can step back, take a deep breath, look at the entire picture in a new way, you can say, okay, oh no, it's not just a dichotomy. There are other options. I don't have to play that game. I don't have to do that way. I can refuse to engage, or however you want to deal with certain things. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and create anew. I want to look a little more closely at your work. First of all, what is it about teaching improv to organizations and individuals that inspired you to get into this kind of work? Like, Tracy, I'll go with you, and then Ralph, you can chime in.
Sure. Well, I had I got into improv, in my early 20s down at Harbourfront in Toronto as a performer. Right? And I performed and got into kind of sketch comedy and the fringe as a hobby. And at the same time, as I was doing that, I was also working in the business world as a communications person, a director, got into marketing and all that, and they were kind of going side by side, the business world I was in and improv. And what happened for me is improv started to inform how people can communicate better. It comes down to this whole yes and, which is the foundation principle of improv, where, and we'll do an exercise in a minute to demonstrate for the people watching. And so it'd be kind of like, I'm listening to you. I hear what you're saying. I take your idea. I may not agree with it, but I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to build on it and offer you something back. And that's what improv is. I'm going back and forth with this yes and. And when I was in the business world, I saw a lot of, shutting people down, no, you can't do this. And so through the years, improv's actually become part of the corporate world. And it was a natural partnership between Ralph and I because we knew each other and he knew I worked in business. And so, I'd been in improv a long time and we bring slightly different skills, yet complementary skills, because Ralph's such an amazing improv teacher.
Yeah. Tracy basically translates. I say, oh, this is what's going on. And she goes, okay, so the next time you're with a client, and then I can see their lights go on. And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you for translating that into something that's more meaningful to the participants. But my goal, my path was similar. When I started working with companies, it was more about just team building. Like we would just give them a fun couple-hour activity. Sometimes we incorporate it with a bit of a show, and it was. But then over time, what I started noticing is that these people can really use this stuff, like this active listening, right? So just to give you a quick example, most people listen to someone talk not for the information they're saying, but they're waiting for their turn to respond. So, like for example, Dave, if you want to tell me a time you got in trouble in high school, well, I'll immediately start thinking about the time I got in trouble in high school, and I'm just waiting to tell my story because my story is better because I star in it, right? So that's the way a lot of people, have conversations. And if you eavesdrop on people in public, you'll hear them, they're talking at each other. They're not really, you'll hear everybody else start their conversation and say like, yeah, but anyway, yeah, but, and they just like ignore completely what the person said and go on with their point. But at improv, we really get into active listening. And what that means is like to actually not think about what I'm going to say next, how I'm going to protect my ego or impress you, but what is it you're actually saying? And letting it land. It's a hard skill, but it's one I don't think people pay any kind of attention to because they don't even know it exists. They don't even know they're listening in a way that's not, beneficial for them.
Tracy, you bring also a more spirit guided approach to your work, and yes, and in your studying with Eckhart Tolle. So how does what he teaches dovetail into enhancing the improv training experience both you and Ralph are teaching and leading? How does that?
Beautifully. And in fact, I often talk about the work I do with Eckhart Tolle right in my workshops. And Ralph does too about, he's quite spiritual. You'll find in a minute as well. And so I got into The Power of Now, which is Eckhart Tolle's famous book, The Power of Now. And I went down to see Eckhart Tolle and work directly with him in California in 2019. And it really works with what we're doing with improv, because it's all about being in the moment. And, I've had lots of leaders say to me, when I'm doing improv, I can't be disrupted by the voice in my head anymore, the thoughts, right? And Eckhart Tolle will tell you that his number one achievement in life, is being able to not think when he wants to. That's his number one achievement, right? And we think about our thoughts are constantly overwhelming us because we identify with them. We think that they are something we always have to listen to. Improv gets you out of your head and into the present moment in a beautiful way and gets you collaborating and playful at the same time. What could be better than playing while you're in the moment and being present, deep active listening, giving and taking through yes and. It's quite amazing what improv does. And, it used to be for comedy and sketch teams and so forth. And because of the principles of improv being so effective for communication development, they've come forward into the working world, and it's full blast as a best practice now.
Right, so I've got a couple questions for you here, and well, look, you were gonna yes and so you go first.
Well, just yes, Tracy's right. I'm very into psychology and philosophy, and there's a lot of overlap between mindfulness or the Stoics or Taoism with improv. So, for example, the Stoics are very much about like just worry about what you can control and don't worry about what's outside of your ability to control. Right. And in improv, we do that a lot. Like I can't, if I'm working with a teammate, I can't control what they're going to say and do. I can only react. I can only choose how I'm going to react to it. And we very much are like, what they said was great. Whatever they say, you try to like get into a place where like, that's amazing. So there's a lot of that. And like Taoism, like be like the water, because the eventual outcome of force is not victory, it's exhaustion. So like, let go. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff. So you come back to philosophy and psychology and mindfulness and Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I did want to mention just about, this idea of presence and being in the moment. I can see that sounds like arty and like, what does that really mean? And have I ever experienced that, me in my daily life? Yes, probably. If you're a sports fan, game 7 of anything, when it's like 2:00, you got to work at 7:00 in the morning, but you don't care because you're focused on the next shot, the next pass. That's being in the moment. Or when you go to a movie and you leave and it's dark and you're like, where did 3 hours go? That's being present, right? You lose sense of time and yourself and your ego, and you exist and you just experience something. So art, sports are times when we experience that. Also, when you're bonding with friends, when you're sitting around the table, laughing at all your inside jokes and stuff, or when you're falling in love. These are times, and improv is like falling in love. You suspend judgment, you're positive, you say yes, right? You lose yourself. You serve the relationship, the experience, rather than my selfish needs, my self-conscious needs.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Ralph, improv demands so much, as you're alluding to, and although it looks like fun when we see it on stage, there are those deeper lessons and learnings of it that we can take back to help us live a more connected, open-hearted life. Do you want to maybe expand on that a little bit too?
Sure. I live my life by these principles, and I'll give you an example. Like my daughter, she was 5 years old a couple years ago, and she was like going to school. And she was like, "Daddy, I don't want to go to school. I'm scared." Now, 95% of parents, and I would have done this 10 years ago, I would have tried to gaslight her. I would say, "Oh, there's nothing to be scared about. It's school, right? You'll be fine, right?" That makes sense, right? We just want to get it over with. We want to make her feel better, and not me. No, I go like, "Yeah, I get it. School's scary. You got these big adults walking around yelling at you. There's a kid that bites you. Like, yeah, it's a terrifying place." And she said, "Daddy, you're funny." I said, "Great, let's go to school." All she wanted to do was be her, right? And that's a small example, right? Or this time I was teaching her to skate and she would fall and she was upset. I'm saying, why are you upset? She was like, I'm falling. Yeah, but by falling, you're learning how not to fall and you're going to skate. And the next time she fell, she was like, Daddy, did you see that fall? I was like, it was amazing. So these principles, they have real world applications. It's not like, oh, we're going to go and do some fun games and nothing's going to come of it. No, there's real applications to this stuff that make you a more connected person, a more empathetic person, a more understanding person, a more understanding of like human nature and your own self. There's a lot of self-examination, right? What are my defaults? What do I tend to do? Like when we do this exercise on leaders and followers, are you always a leader? Are you always a follower? And then we never go like shame, you should be one or the other. It's like interesting, right? We just notice it. We live with it. Are you very anxious when you come to this class? Of course you are. Great. No judgment about that. Just like interesting, right? Why? You just sit with those things and you think about them and you investigate yourself, right? And that's powerful too.
It's all, I hear Yoda in my head. There is no try. There is only do or do not. And if you go to an improv class and you're trying to be funny, you're going to fall on your face.
Yep.
You want to speak to that, or Ralph? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I have to try. That's the hardest to convince my students of. Don't try to be funny. Just try to be yourself, which is much harder. Because you're right. If you are funny, usually it fails. At best, you'll get like a, right? Or you come across as like a smart aleck. Nobody likes a smart aleck, right? What do we like? People who are themselves, people who will embrace being vulnerable, who will take a chance, right? Those are leaders. When in our classes, those are the leaders, the ones who like when they get endowed as like, oh, I'm dancing, and then they have to dance, right? And the ones that will do a disco thing, everybody will lose their minds, and they're like, we like that person a lot, right? We'll follow that person anyway because they took a risk. That was not easy, and we celebrate that. The one thing about vulnerability is it's always rewarded with feelings of goodwill. Never like, did you see what he did? He danced. No, it's like, holy crap. I don't think I could do that. That's amazing. I love this person. Or I like them more.
Yeah, because they're being them. I read an article, Tracy, and Ralph, last week. It was on LinkedIn. It was in Time Magazine, and it talked about the mass exodus that's going to happen in the work world. And people are wanting to leave their company. And it's not because the pay is bad or anything like that. It's because they're not feeling appreciated. Do you feel in this climate that we're in, do you feel a deeper passion and purpose in the work you're doing to take this kind of teaching, thinking, and way of being, because it is a beingness? Do you feel a deeper sense of connection to this work?
Yes, because it's all about leadership, right? And now you could argue that everyone's a leader, and it's true. Everyone is a leader. When you're talking about the corporate world and you're talking about leaders of teams, building on what Ralph said, a really strong leader is someone who lets everyone know, it's okay to fail. That's one of the big teachings of improv, right? It's okay to fail. It's okay not to, in this environment, it's okay not to feel great. So if you're a company and you're worried about profits and all you're thinking about is your revenue, well, you're still focusing in the wrong place, because, if you're not focused on the team, people, well-being, you're not going to meet your goals, because the people are your goal. If you put all your focus and energy on enabling, supporting, getting messy with people, then and getting into playfulness, especially at a time like this, when a sense of humor is more important than it's ever been, well, that's when you're going to get a winning team. And you'll find your company comes along and gets out of this because you put people first and embraced the foundation principles of improv. And got people going and working together towards, a common goal with a supportive environment. So everything we do is around getting people out of their comfort zone and saying yes to each other and staying open to this back and forth. That's really important if we're going to And we are gonna, keep moving forward as a team. The companies that don't put their people first, they'll be last.
Yeah, well, and empathy, of course, is needed. And so let's do a little play acting here, role playing with you and Ralph, and let's do a little yes and show those. Well, those listening will have to hear it, but those watching can see it. So, do you want to do a little yes and we can see how that plays out?
Sure. Are we all three of us doing it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sure. So why don't we just head in order? I'll go first, then Tracy, and then David, and we just keep going in that circle. That way we always know what's going on. So let's just tell a story, and I'll do the first line. For this first time, the first word out of your mouth is the word no, and then add a line to the story. Okay. Yeah. So there was a princess who lived in a castle.
No, actually, it was a deep sea water diver.
No, actually, it was one of the most world famous acrobats.
No, it was in space.
No, it was a dog walker.
No, not a dog walker, but a hot dog sales guy.
Oh, okay, great. All right, now that was fun, and that's great. But David, what do we know about this story? What facts do we know?
We know that we had different scenes, different storylines possible.
Sure. Yeah. But of the story itself, what facts about the actual story? Do we know anything?
No.
For sure? No, nothing. Right? So every time, sorry?
Nothing happened.
Yeah, right? Nothing happened. Because every time we say no, the idea that came before it is destroyed, and we start over again. And everybody's and we never get anywhere, right? And, sometimes of course, it's important to say no, to be protective and all that, but we try to encourage our defaults to be not no, but yes, and. So I'm going to say the first line, and we're going to tell this similar story, starting from the same place, but this time we're going to start with yes, and then add a line. So there was a princess who lived in a castle.
Yes, and she loved to decorate.
Mm.
Yes, and she met a prince who also loved to decorate.
Yes, and they decided to remodel the entire castle.
Yes, and they rang up a huge bill.
Yes, and Home Depot put them on the VIP list.
Oh, yes, and they got their own show on the home channel.
Yes, and the princess became a big entrepreneur and was super successful.
Yes, and the prince was her biggest fan.
There we go. Great. Now, what do we know about this story? So much, right? We know there's a prince and a princess. They remodeled their castle. They became Instagram famous celebrities. He was her biggest fan.
Yeah, sorry? And we had to listen and accept each other's offer.
Yeah, right. But we're building on everybody's ideas. Together, the three of us are way smarter than any one person, and more creative, and we can collaboratively, we can get to places we can't get by ourselves, like that idea of standing on the shoulders of giants. Together, we can do that. Individually, I could never write that story.
Yeah.
None of us could write that story individually. I mean, and yes, that's not the greatest story ever written, but it's not about the writing of the story. It's the journey for us. It's the journey. It's the collaboration. It's the taking a risk, right? Because what I'm saying when I say yes is like, I like that idea. And all of a sudden I feel like, I feel more ready to give more ideas, right? If you're going to accept them and listen to them and give them, credence, I'll give you more. But if you keep shutting me down, I'm going to shut up.
So when we're in a corporate environment, working with teams, doing an exercise like that,
yeah,
the power of the exercise is we do it and it's really fun and dynamic and everyone's laughing. However, the magic also happens in the debrief after, because that's when we say, hey, and we get people involved. What does this exercise do? Well, it gets you out of thinking you're right, that your idea is the only way. It gets you into a collaborative mindset so that you're accepting each other. Because often, in the workplace, people are like coming into a meeting, I'm going to tell my idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, like it's the management, we're right, and workers, So So then this also helps to bridge those differences between two opposing sides as well.
Breaks down bureaucracy and silos. Yes, that's another thing.
There's it brings the kind of a bottom up orientation to certain things, right? Like, oh, everybody's got ideas, and where those ideas come from, they're always coming from the top. That's not great.
No.
I mean, it might work well if you've got a great leader, but how many of those are there? How many Bill Gates? How many Steve Jobs, Elon Musk's in the world?
Not many.
Or how many Oprahs?
Right. Oh yeah.
Or Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama. Yes.
Or
exactly.
Brene Brown's in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's coming to mind a lot because one of the things I'm getting from our conversation is that when you yes and, shame disappears. And we're usually afraid to speak up or express ourselves or communicate because we can be made wrong or made fun of or people laugh. But when you're yes-anding, it allows you to be open and real and vulnerable, as you alluded to earlier, Ralph. So do you want to?
Yeah. No puts us in that mindset of like, what can go wrong? If I open my mouth, I might get told to shut up and I look stupid or whatever. Yes, and puts us in the mindset of like, what can go right? What are the opportunities here? Oh, I didn't even think about opportunities. All I just thought about was the cost, right? But every moment of uncomfortable moment or like moment where I have to put myself out there has costs, but it also has possibilities, right? What if I take this?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, what if I take this, mold on this plate, put it on bacteria? Maybe it'll kill it, right? And that's what Fleming did to create penicillin. If he did, like, that was a mistake. That was like something he was going to throw away. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Let's just see what this is like, right? We're the first person that like took meat and threw it in the fire. And his friends stuck around saying, what are you doing? You're going to burn that. Yeah, just let's just try it. Are you crazy? I don't know, maybe. And now right? And that's without those disruptors, without those people, we wouldn't be anywhere. We'd still be living in caves, terrified of the stars, right? So we need those people. And improv, that's a gateway into those people to get outside the box, right? Because we think we have these parameters, right? Oh, bordered by legality or the ends of human experience or whatever, right? But improv will get you pushing away at those barriers. Like, oh, I never even thought about that was even possible. Sure, it is.
Yeah, or that old company policy. We've always done it this way.
Always done it this way, right? No, well, that's dead thinking, right? You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Tracy, I want to go back to the spiritual aspects of improv. Yeah. And we've touched on communication skills, listening, offer acceptance, feeling safe to share ideas, building on initiatives within an organization by yes-anding. And these can really have transformational outcomes for a company and those it serves. Speak to us as to how this plays out and if there are any enhancements to improve, or what are some enhancements to improving that team dynamic? And then how does it also maybe affect a customer experience? If the team's doing well, how does that play out with the customer?
So if you start with the individual, let's just say it's a leader or a team member first, and then also the team and the customer. I want to go back to at the beginning of this, we were talking about what makes you feel present. And Ralph brought up some things that automatically make you feel present, like sports or falling in love. So as an individual, the practice that you can get into to help you become more of an improviser is to start to observe yourself, right? I call it a moment by moment practice. If you're brushing your teeth or doing any chore, you can be present by getting aware with it. So observation and awareness skills are huge with improv, and you can start by working on it alone. So in the morning, you get up, you observe yourself and stay very present with what you're doing, whether it's making coffee, you're really taking your time, those skills transfer into how you go about your day with your team, okay? Whether you're the leader or the individual, because now you're coming in, more ready to have an improvisational attitude because you're engaging in this observation and awareness. And so what I would say is if you bring improv in as a regular training as part of your team development, those habits start to form. I'm going to be observing, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to be listening, I'm going to be yes-anding, becomes part of your practice and habit, if you will. And so how does the customer benefit? Well, it benefits from the presence and attitude of the leader or team member that you're speaking with, because suddenly they're listening to you. Suddenly they're more engaged with what you need and what you're saying, rather than trying to sell you something. So improv, I have a background in sales and also cold calling, which is highly improvisational because it gets you into that moment of presence, listening, give and take, yes, and it really relates to everything.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rolf.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to give a couple little quick specific examples of just, so improv within a team, one thing we stress is that there are no bad ideas. Right? There's no bad offers. There's no bad, like, say whatever's on your mind, right? And we all initially come at it for the default of yes and, rather than like, well, that's weird. Why would we do that? We've always done it this way, right? Yeah, okay, all right. Let's investigate this. Let's yes and it. Let's role play it out. Let's do the thought experiment and see where it leads. So it's really good for valuing everybody's input, creating an atmosphere where we're not going to judge you and say like that's stupid. And then with customers, one thing that really comes up a lot is the idea of like when a customer comes with a problem or a complaint, you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Well, hold on. What's the opportunity here again, right? There's obviously something that they've noticed. Maybe they're right. Like when someone comes at us and they're angry, our default is, we either go like, we match it and yell back at them, or we like cower and we give them whatever they want, right? But there's a middle ground. There's the adult, which is like, okay, you're obviously upset. Let's talk about what your problem is, because they may have a point and they may bring you valuable information that can then, so again, what's the opportunity in this interaction rather than getting upset and, being personally injured because someone's upset.
Right. And that's a big thing too, being aware of our triggers and, people are really a lot more sensitive to these days, and they are getting triggered. Does the art of practicing improv also help to perhaps see our own triggers and not take things less personally? Because we're all offended. Everybody's offended by something these days.
Yeah. Yes, it absolutely does. You build empathy. Because when we role play sometimes in companies, if you're, management, you gotta, let's look at, you're gonna play the employee in this situation and back and forth. So you get a little window, a bit of understanding into the other world. Absolutely. There's a lot in improv. We talk a lot about nonverbal communication. And we do this exercise with eye contact, and like we have people like walk by each other, but they look at each other all the time, right? And we're like, okay, what's an interaction like? And the takeaway from that is how everybody perceives things differently. Some people see that as a threat. Some people see it as very welcoming, right? But the thing is, we all project, we all write in our heads the fiction that we think is going on. And just being aware of like, well, what you perceive may not be the reality. Even if this person is rude to you, they might have just gotten dumped. They might have just got bad medical news. Like you don't know. So let's try not to jump to conclusions like that person's garbage or you're a jerk, right? Let's take a step back, right? And like, okay, well, hold on, maybe they're having a bad day, and 99% of the time, it's not about you. It's not about you. Don't take it personally, right? Even though I understand the desire to, yeah.
Boy, and we're in a time of cancel culture, and that like individually as friends and colleagues to. That's it. I'm not working with that company ever again, So it's like this is important stuff that you're talking about. Yeah. I want to just do, if you're okay to do a couple of exercises, because especially in a company setting. So one of my favorites is the high status and the low status, right? And so the high status, could be this big boss. Yeah, I'm the boss around here, Jenkins, and then I'm the lowly copy boy. But then all of a sudden there's that shift. And the lowly copy boy becomes the high status, and the boss becomes the low status. Do you want to do a little bit of that? Are you okay, comfortable doing that? Or you want to do more observation? Like the other thing about improv too that I love is that you've got to set a scene. So it's like you got to be pretty pronounced in what you're doing. So, anybody
Mhm.
doing here,
Yes. And you're right. That's the getting into the idea of scene work of like, okay, I'm going to take on a character that's unlike me in any way. And we're going to have like role play, like, a scene where we're two cops on a stakeout. That we don't quite get there with our introductory things with corporations. That's more, well, that would be more long term, but we do like some of the techniques, like, oh, clarity, right? Like you were doing this thing and I was like, are you pouring, what are you, a chemist or something? But so we do look at like, okay, let's try to be clear with our intentions, right? Nonverbal communication. We say, as human beings, we rarely say what we mean, right? We rarely say it. How you doing? Fine. No, you're not fine, right? We don't want to burden people or whatever. But nonverbal communication, we don't lie. Like people talk about microaggressions or micro emotions or one of these things. Like you can't hide that. That just comes out. Like if I don't like you, David, it's really hard for me to cover that up. Like, hey, how you doing? So we look much more like, being clear with our intention, or like seeing what people are really conveying with their body language. There's a lot of like, folded arms tends to be closed off, or you're turning your back on people, looking at your watch. These are all indications of like how people are actually feeling.
Yeah. So do you want to try a little low status, high status?
Sure. Do you want to do it with me, or what? What?
No, you
How do you
you two do it. You two do it.
All right.
I want
right.
David to do it.
Okay, so let's just set up a little scenario here, David. So do you want to start low or start high?
My Christmas card list for this one.
Your bucket list. Do you want to start low or high? What do you want to start?
I'll start low.
All right, I'll start high. So, and then Tracy, where are we? How do we know each other?
You're on space. On the moon.
We're in space.
You're on the moon.
On the moon. Okay. All right. Okay. Hey, I want you to get out there with leave your helmet inside.
Yeah, but us Martians always wear helmets.
Well, today's a new day. I'm in charge. Get that helmet off and get out there.
Yeah, but boss, like, I'll not have any oxygen. I'll just like decombust.
That's the idea, because I don't like you very much.
Yeah. And you're giving me orders, but I am fighting back a little bit. So
Huh?
I am fighting back a little bit, right?
What do you mean? Are you trying to stand up for yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm just a lowly little Martian here on the moon.
Oh yeah, well, I don't like the idea of people standing up to me. That's not my jam. I'm used to like just walking over people and get what I want.
Yeah. Well, what if I brought you this?
Oh, hey, put that away. What is that? No, that looks dangerous. Hey, look. Hey, look. Why do you be in charge? Okay, I'll just go. You know what? I'll go outside. I don't want to be in here anymore. Look, here's my helmet. See you later.
Oh, boss, eat it. Eat it. It's cheese. The moon's made.
I can't. I already exploded in the vacuum of space.
He gave up his superiority to you.
Gave up my superiority. Came low.
Yeah.
That's good fun, and that's a good exercise in like collaboration. Because I can't go low until you go high, or vice versa, right? You got to listen to each other. That's very much being in the moment, right? Can't do that and be thinking about what's for dinner.
Yes.
Right. And I'd like, oh, you're like, well, what's the value in that? Well, presence, right? And if you talk to, like, I have a friend who's a psychologist, and she and I talk a lot about the brain body connection, the value of presence. She's like a clinician, and she treats people now, and they try to get them in states of presence. Right. That again, it's the presence of being here and now in this moment, focused completely here, which I'm sure to a lot of people listening to this feels like, I don't know what that means. But if you investigate mindfulness or flow, like mindfulness is about like just noticing what's going on with your body, trying to get you in a state of here.
You could read The Power of Now.
Yeah.
You read The Power of Now.
To that earlier, Trace, this interview today, and that Eckhart Tolle's goal is to have no thought, right?
That's right.
To be an empty vessel.
Yeah.
To be open to the stimuli that comes in, not judge, but react how you want to react to it, choose how you react to it, send it back out. Right?
Yeah. And just be here now in the moment, not in the past, because the past is done. not in the future, just what
in
do
the future.
and this is where good creation starts to happen and collaboration starts to happen, is in the moment. If you look back into the past, well, you might dredge some things up, but if you look too far into the future, so in the moment is where, that's the power. Tracy, I want to just shift gears, and Ralph, I still want to, got a couple more questions. Well, no, Ralph, I'm going to ask you first. We've talked before, and what I really loved about our first conversation a couple of weeks ago was how zen you are about this, and how so well versed you are in psychology and philosophy and the various religious practices of Buddhism, Taoism, and you already mentioned that today in our conversation. So
right.
There's a more zen aspect to learning and practicing improv. And so much so that it tears down the walls of our personas at work, that we truly are, we can truly become exposed on stage quite easily. Have you seen those more in these, power roles within an organization where the boss does have to drop the facade of who they're being and allow maybe their true inner child or their true silly selves to come out for a spin once in a while?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a tremendous intersection with improv, presence, Eckhart Tolle, Zen Buddhism, Taoism, all and current psychological and philosophical things, right? And my thing is like, well, if they all say it, there's got to be some truth in it, right? And I just come at this as a completely experiential person. Like, I didn't study psychology, didn't study philosophy, but noticed these things. And then as I became aware of the philosophies, it's like, oh, that's exactly the same as this. The Taoist, be like water. Oh, an improv, don't sweat. Don't try to force your agenda. Just go with what's happening, right? So so I think there's this perception of leaders as being like dogmatic, my way or the highway, I'm alpha, we're gonna work hard, but my agenda, right? But when it works, when you see real leadership in reality, it's a person that's willing to be vulnerable. It's the person who's like, I would never ask anybody else to do what I'm not ready to do myself. And when you see it in real life, when you see someone stand out and like do that disco move or something, take a chance, and everybody just like marvels at them, like, oh my goodness, I don't think I could have the guts to do that. And that's real leadership, and that's real forming like, I would follow that person anywhere, versus the like, boy, I feel stifled. I feel like there's just this person is like weighing on me, and I got to be like this, and every movement is watched, and I hate it here, and I want to quit and go be an entrepreneur, right? Or go do something else. But you can actually absolutely foster, And I run my own business, a separate business, and I have a team of people that I work for, and they think the world of me. And that's a lot of that stuff. Like, I would never ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself, right? There's the dirtiest job, I'll do the dirtiest job. You don't have to, I'll do that one.
He's washing the dishes.
Yeah. I'm or dealing with it, like I tell my people who teach for me, right? You got a difficult student, send them to me, I'll take care of it, right? And so they feel very empowered, and they feel like, okay, if there's a problem I can't have, I know who's got my back, my boss, right? And I just push that out there, right?
That's amazing. Talking about this inner child that I talked to you about, Ralph, Tracy, how would teaching improv within schools impact how kids saw themselves, and also how would improve the connection among each other at school?
Right. Well, we have a partnership with the University of Toronto, and actually Ralph and I facilitate a lot with students. And as well, younger students are exposed to improv in grade school. And there's a lot of improv going into schools to help combat bullying, right? Which is fantastic, because it's about taking different perspectives and all the things we've been talking about, and, engaging with one another as human beings, and to move people away from bullying. In university, it's about helping people gain confidence and have their own voice, and come forward and start to get comfortable with interviewing skills and networking, and start to see a possibility in the world where They can yes and have open communication with one another. What's interesting to me in education is I'd like to see more mindfulness, more improv, more life skills. And I think we're starting to open the door towards that. However, the door needs to open a lot more in education.
I think honestly, improv or theater should be taught in all schools, and every child should have a chance to experience this because of the skills you develop, especially towards empathy, right? Because that's a hallmark, is like understanding somebody else's journey, right? Because now in this world, to your point earlier, David, about how toxic things feel, like there's this knee jerk, like I'm my tribe, there's your tribe, and I cannot see any way into that, right? And regardless of what you think, ultimately we're going to have to talk to each other. Even people who disagree violently are going to have to talk to each other, or else it's going to get worse. I mean, it is getting worse, or it feels like it's getting worse. I don't know what the reality is, because all our reality is filtered through, organizations that derive money from us when we click on things and read them. So the reality, because when you talk to people privately, it's very different than getting on social media. But yeah, empathy is incredibly important, and improv, theater are two ways to do that. And the arts are seen as, like, what's the first thing that gets cut in school? The arts, because it doesn't produce anything, and we think it's like, oh, it's extraneous, it's useless. It's not. It is about connecting as human beings. And what do human beings want more than anything else? Connecting with other human beings.
Yeah. And the fact that we talked about yes anding and no idea is stupid, that's also too about limiting shame, and shame is to me it's a big showstopper in moving forward and taking risks and chances. And then if you're in a place of shame, you're also lacking that self-love, and that's also really important, especially for kids to love themselves, not in a narcissistic kind of way, but
I know, yeah, but in a realized self-confidence kind of like, I'm a distinct human being, an individual, and I own that. Yeah.
There's so much more to ask, but as we wrap up our show today, I just want to find out who inspired you both to get into this work. And was it within you from an early age? Were you both class clowns, or were you performing in one way or another growing up as kids?
Well, I'll jump in first. Some of the beautiful things about improv are also the limitations. Like the boon is the bane, right? And one thing about improv is there weren't really trendsetters. When I started, like, it was really kind of in its infancy. There were a few pockets here and there, like Second City was kind of in its infancy, derived from the Compass Players, which was in the 50s, and like in St. Louis, there was a gentleman in Edmonton, but there weren't people to guide you, and that might seem limiting, but at the same time, it's like, oh, this is the frontier, this is the Wild West. And so there was no one to say, oh, you're doing improv wrong, you're doing that wrong. So as long as we were like in it, and like we were in creating it, in like, that made it very, very exciting, and it brought a lot of really talented people to it, which is why you saw this explosion in like the 80s and 90s from all these like incredible comedians who dove into this art form, and now it's like it's everywhere. So I think to me, what was exciting about it was that there wasn't anybody before us, and we were creating it, and no one was saying poo-poo, right? Like we talked before, David, like color outside the lines. There was no one to say, oh, you're coloring wrong, keep those inside. No, we colored outside the lines. We discovered all kinds of new things.
And Trace, did you have this in you as a kid? Like, did you have this, joy of performing and laughter? And
I think spirituality and presence is something that's always informed me naturally. And someone just told me, hey, you should check out improv and go to a class. And I just went on a total lark one day in my early 20s, and I never left. And it's because improv is a huge community. It's like the Hotel California. Once you go, you can never leave. And it's true. It's a family.
Well, yeah, or you'd still be at theater sports down by the lake.
That's what it was.
I tell my students that improv is like a cult, but the cult that doesn't make you disavow your family or spend all your money. It's the good kind of cult. It's like all the pluses without all the weirdness, right?
Yeah. Well, it does make you shave your head, though.
There is one thing I want to point out for the listeners. And that is, if you are interested in scene work and personal growth through improv, and that sort of thing, I would contact us and go down and do a class with Ralph at the Social Capital Theater for that type of improv, where you're getting into scene work. If you're looking for a team building, skills training, sales development, confidence building type thing, we do different types of exercises and debriefs for that. So there's two different kinds of things going on here. There's scene work that's more, at the theater, and then there's skills development and team building, leadership skills. That's through our other company, Yes Unlimited. So they are a bit different, and it's always a safe space for people when they come, and we take care of everyone really well.
So I'm going to get to a little bit of your contact info in a sec, but one final thing. Working with an organization or a company, what was one of your finest moments?
I have to speak to that because it was so beautiful, and I've had more than one, but this one really stood out for me, which is I was training by myself. I was training a large international cosmetic company, a team of 30 salespeople, and I had them all in a circle, and I was doing a gratitude exercise where you put and this is something you can do by yourself, right? And it's a great thing to do every morning. I had them put their arms out at their sides and just say, I'm grateful. We can do it now. I'm grateful, right? And it shifts the brain when you do that. And, we had an incredible day of role playing. And then the next morning I came in with the same team, and they, without my asking, everyone got into a circle and they just started spreading their arms and going, I'm grateful. And it was so beautiful, because to me, that's the heart of it all.
Yeah.
Is getting connected as a team and experiencing that gratitude together.
Yeah. And imagine how good you feel coming to work too, right? Yeah. You're in joy right away.
I have so many stories, but I think my favorite is one that I see all the time. And it's, we start, whether it's, with a company like this, and everybody comes in and everybody's nervous, and they're all like sitting, and they're all like sitting like this, or like with their arms crossed and hug, they're all self-soothing, and they're terrified. Like, what am I going to ask them to do? Are they going to look stupid? The boss is here. Oh my God. And there's no talking. It's very muted. It's very quiet. Right? No smiles, nothing like that. We go through 2 hours of this. Afterwards, everybody's sitting in their chairs. They're like lounging. They look like a painting from like 1920s Paris, right? They're all like smoking, like they're just transformed, right? And I'm just like, just notice that. And you feel that glow. I'm like, yeah, I can feel that. Yeah, that sense of like calmness, right? Yes. Well, that's 2 hours of presence, of bonding with human beings. That connecting, when we connect with human beings on a real level, like not in any kind of like, just real, like, oh, and what I mean by that is like, I can just be myself around here, right? We talked about fear before, like it used to be the fear of stealing resources. Now it's the fear of like the ego, right? Oh, there's a real person in here, but I don't like that person. I don't think you'll like that person, so I'm going to hide it. With improv, that person comes out, and then you see, oh, people accept this person. That's
and that
weird.
person starts dancing.
I didn't think people would like this person. They do. And then at the end, everybody's just like, cool. So I always love that moment when I'm done. I'm just like sitting down, looking at everybody.
I really appreciate that, because I think it's really important for us to be who we truly are and to drop the crap already,
And it's the hardest thing in the world. It's so hard for people to do that. So I understand how difficult it is, because we've had decades in some cases of like conditioning. Don't show off, don't make waves, don't, whatever, right? And like, no, you just got to be yourself.
Yeah. And what a great interview today. This was so beautiful, and you two are amazing. I love the fact that you're bringing connection, idea sharing, the courage to be you, listening, collaboration, creativity. This is what's needed moving forward. If we're going to make a shift, and boy, it's time, we got to get out of these past stories, and we got to make a shift into really like true possibility and possibility of like who we can be as adults. So
Right.
last thing, where do we connect with you? What are the websites and the contact info? So shameless self-promotion time. Tracy, I'll go with you, and then Ralph, I know you got the social capital.
Sure. Yeah, so Ralph and I are business partners, and if you want to get in touch, our website is yesunlimited.ca, and you can always get me at Tracy at yesunlimited.ca, and you'll find my info on the website as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's our company that's geared specifically towards business training, leadership training, sales training, as Tracy alluded to. I have a separate company. It's called the Social Capital, Socap.ca, SOCAP, and we train comedians. But by and large, the vast majority of our students are not comedians. They are people who come because it's a fun thing to do, personal growth. They want to get out of the comfort zone. They want to be creative. And I also do a whole separate school now on social skills.
Oh,
just like how to talk to people.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. You know, how, like, if talking to people makes you anxious, come and do classes with me. And because it's a lot of it is reframing, in like, you know, what I alluded to before about like, oh, we all know what could go wrong. Oh, if I'm going to talk to a stranger in Starbucks or wherever, I know 100 things go wrong. What about what could go right?
Yeah. And I do a lot of work with youth, and that's a skill they really need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really thank you for being part of the RiSE podcast today. We're going to have you back. Okay. So if we missed anything today, we'll come at it again. Yeah. And again, this podcast for you watching and listening, it's really to inspire individuals like you to, and RiSE stands for Rise Up, Inspire and Make an Impact, be socially aware, and continue that entrepreneurial spirit that's really got decked this past 18, 19 months to make life in the world a better place. Join us next week. We're going to welcome Dwania Peel and talk about burnout in your business and life and why stepping away is courageous and life-affirming. Until then, I'm your host, David Cohen. It was a pleasure speaking with Tracy Shea-Porter and Ralph MacLeod of yesunlimited.ca and Socap theater.ca.
Yeah. Socap.ca.
Socap.ca. And maybe a name change for the company, Yes and Unlimited. Have a good week, everybody.
Have a great week, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.